Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to our little mini masterclass series. Give me a second to get us all called in and oriented as we get started today talking about expansion. And most importantly, we're going to be talking about calibrating your energy. Last week, we talked about the will center and the sacral center. Today, we're going to talk about the emotional solar plexus or the creative center in quantum human design and the root center or the divine timing center in quantum human design. So give me just a second to get us all situated here. I hope it's really beautiful wherever you are. We have definitely had April showers here this month. So, all right. I have a couple of announcements that I want to start with before we get too far into our conversation, which is going to be really fun, and I'm super excited about it because this is some of my favorite stuff to talk about when we talk about quantum human design. I want to remind you all that starting on Monday, April the 28th at 11 a.m. Central, I'm going to be on Zoom. I won't be here, but we will post the links here for you so you can join us on Zoom. I'm going to be leading a 5-day masterclass series, and in this 5-day series, we're going to be talking about transformation and how to coach yourself and your people, whether it's your family, your community, your clients. We're going to talk about how to coach and support and nurture people during times of disruption. Over the last few weeks, if you've been here on our Friday Lives, we've been talking about disruption, we've been talking about the void, and we've been talking about expansion. Next week, I'm going to bring in not just information about those three crucial phases, but the science of what we need to understand in order to utilize disruptive cycles as catalysts for massive growth. Here's the thing. If you don't understand how to use these cycles effectively to create lasting change, you run the risk, we all are at risk right now with where we are collectively. We run the risk of getting stuck in reactive cycles. And when we talk about reactive, meaning we keep making the same choices again and again and again, which basically means that we have a tendency, especially because of our fear of the unknown or our unresolved grief or lack of clarity about who we are, we have a tendency when we go through these disruptive cycles to make the same kind of choice again. So if we think about being confronted by opportunities to choose differently, right? There's a space between that opportunity or a stimulus and response. If you don't know how to take control of that space between stimulus and response, you're going to miss the opportunity to use a disruptive cycle as a pushing off point for massive growth, as a place of massive alignment. And that's really the key, massive alignment with your authentic self so that your life, you can begin to call in and create a life that's a reflection of who you really are. Now, I started our conversation about calibrating your energy last week. And last week I said, one of the major sources or causes of disruption in our lives is burnout. And when we are referring to burnout or when we're talking about burnout, oh, by the way, if you want to sign up for the Masterclass series, Teresa's going to post the link for you below. When we talk about burnout, we oftentimes think of burnout as being flat out on the couch, not being able to move, not having the energy. And certainly that can be part of it. That can be a way that burnout manifests. But sometimes burnout also manifests as compromise or settling for mediocrity. We go through a life at 50%, or I like to call it a meh life, right? We have a meh kind of life. It's not bad, it's not terrible, but it's not great. It's not enlivening. We don't wake up excited for whatever it is that we're going to do. And generator types tend to be more of the settling for mediocrity kind of burnout. The other types, manifestors, projectors, reflectors, tend to lean more towards flagrant burnout. Either way, when we go through cycles of burnout, we have a tendency to manifest disruption, chaos, some kind of event that dismantles everything that's not working. And it's tricky. It's tricky because what that does is that disruption, which is a key part of the transformation process, spits us out into a cycle of liminality. We get spit out into what I like to call the void. So we get spit out into this sort of pregnant space, if you will, this space where there's nothing but possibility. It's a space that's full of potential, but it's also a space where not a lot is happening, because the purpose of that space is for us to prepare for expansion. And I'll tell you, even though our collective world right now is feeling really disrupted, we're also sort of in the void, right? We're sort of sitting in that space of there's all these options, there's all these possibilities of what we could do if we dismantle things or if things get dismantled, right? But if we don't understand how to steer the cosmic forces, if you will, by shifting our narrative, by shifting our identity, because that's really what's happening, right? Really what's happening when we have disruption is you've outgrown the old story. It doesn't fit you anymore. You're not the person you were when you first entered into something. And so we consciously or unconsciously blow it up, right? And then we go into the void. And really the purpose of that void is for you to take back control over your story, your identity, and begin to become the person you are supposed to be, you were born to be, so that your outer reality can become a better reflection of that new identity, that new story. But a lot of us get stuck in the void. A lot of us get stuck in the void, and we get stuck in the void for a lot of reasons. If you saw some of my master classes from before, I talked about sometimes we get stuck in the void because of unresolved grief. Sometimes we get stuck in the void because our fear of the unknown is so big, we just try to go back to how things used to be. Sometimes we get stuck in the void because we're tired, which is what we're going to talk about today. We're tired, and we don't have what feels like the energy to build something new, because we're still deconditioning the idea that doing uses willpower. We forget, or we haven't learned yet, that in order for us to move forward, we have to start first by recalibrating our identity. And that's not as hard as going out and trying to force your life into form, right? That actually we can recalibrate our identity from the couch. It's still work. And if you go back and watch the Masterclass series that I did a couple weeks ago about the sacredness of rest, you have to do that part, right? If you are burned out, if you are exhausted, if you're not optimizing your energy, and as I talked about last week, and you're compromising on your dream, you've downsized your dream and you're building a chicken coop instead of a cathedral with your life and all the skills that you have for creating something magnificent, that also costs you energy. In order for you, one of the most important things for you to do, in order for you to navigate the unknown, the void, that liminal space between disruption and growth, you have to have energy. Especially, I'm going to say, especially for my projector friends. You know, I have the privilege of raising a projector child. I have not had I have a lot of kids, and I have not had the privilege of raising a projector child from birth. So I have this 15-year-old, almost 16-year-old projector child. And it's so powerful. It's so hard for me to watch in some cases, to see how much anxiety she has around having energy, because her energy doesn't work like my manifesting generator energy or her dad's generator energy, or, you know, the generator world, right? And so when she absolutely has to have cycles and seasons of rest and renewal, right? We all do, but certainly open cycle types need that even more. And if she doesn't get that adequately, like right now, this week, you know, she's a projector, but she's a projector with 3 motors. She's a projector with only one open center, the sacral center. She's in love with horses. And that means that she does a lot of, I'm from Texas, so I can say that she does a lot of crazy ass stuff on a horse, right? Like she does acrobatics on horses, and she stands on 2 horses and rides horses, and she's shooting bows and arrows from the back of a horse. She does things on horses that terrify me as a mother, right? So every little bit, every quarter at the barn where she rides, they do horse shows. So she's in a horse show this weekend. So that horse show is a lot of energy for her, right? There's practice, there's dress rehearsal, there's more practice, there's more dress rehearsal. She's been at the barn every night this week for hours and hours and hours. And last night she had a complete meltdown, right? An anxiety attack, a panic attack, because she's anxious about not having enough rest time and enough energy, so that when she's, you know, done with this horse show, she'll have a day off before she has to go back to school, right? So when you are a projector type, if you don't have that energy calibrated, if you don't have a lifestyle and you don't know how to regulate the way in which you manage and utilize your energy, you can create anxiety for yourself around the energy or the fear of the lack of energy. And that can cause you to go back to the known, right? You don't know how much energy is going to take to grow. And you might get scared or panic about that energy, having that energy, calling in that energy, about needing to do what's necessary for growth. And if you don't understand that the alignment piece is first, the alignment piece is so essential. If you're thinking that that growth piece is going to come from your pushing, from your willpower, from your forcing it into place, that it's going to take grit and hustle. And I'm not saying there isn't work involved. There's always work involved. But if you are aligned first with a new identity, if you are able to calibrate your energy more effectively in that pregnant space between stimulus and response, then the work that you do is much easier. It's actually in sync with who you are. And what happens then consequently is somewhat magical. That's when serendipity and synchronicity happen. That's when all those unexpected twists and turns in the plot outline that are actually working in your favor can unfold. So what feels like potentially a lot of work and effort to build something new can actually become pretty seamless and pretty flowy, if you will, pretty natural in its unfolding. And so when we're working in that void space, we have to make sure that we're calibrating our energy along with establishing or building a new identity, a new story, something that's more worthy of the true story that you were born to fulfill. Literally the true story that only you can fulfill, right? So last week we talked about calibrating the will center. We talked about calibrating the sacral. I want to go back to three really important themes before I get started in talking about the emotional solar plexus and the root center. There are 4 motors in the human design chart: the will center, the sacral center, the emotional solar plexus, and the root center. Everyone has them, right? You can't look at your body and say, oh, I don't have a heart, right? You have a heart. We all have hearts. We all have all the body parts, hopefully, right? Just like you also all have all of the human design chart. So oftentimes when we look at the chart, especially when we're first learning about human design, we have a tendency to say, oh, I don't have a G center, or I don't have a will center, or I don't have a sacral. You have it. If it's white on your chart, you still have it. The colors on your chart or the white parts on your chart are about how you're configured. Your chart is a how, not a what. And when we start to look at the chart as a how, not a what your chart tells you is that anything that's colored in is that's called definition. Anything that's colored in on the chart, that's part of what you're here to give out to the world. That's part of what you're here to emit into the world. That's energy that you have consistent access to, and that's oftentimes energy that people feel and sense from you. Everything that's white in the chart, anything we call that open or undefined. Anything that's white on the chart is actually where you're receiving energy from the world. That's where you're taking energy in from the world around you, and you're taking it in and you're amplifying it, and consequently, you're also experiencing it in a very intense way. And oftentimes we focus on openness when we talk about the deconditioning process or the healing process in human design, because that's where we often feel things in such a big way that we notice them more than we notice sometimes the pain that we can also carry with our definition. Openness, the white parts of your chart have a goal. And the goal, first of all, let me just say the overarching goal is to optimize how your chart functions. Okay? So when we start talking about centers and I start talking about the emotional solar plexus, I'm not so much looking at, is it open, is it defined, although that can be important too. I'm really looking at, are you optimizing it based on how your chart is configured? And I'll tell you something, and this is really important. We can look at individual centers on our charts, but if we're looking at the center out of context of the whole chart, you're gonna miss a lot, which is why I can't stress strongly enough how important it is to get a good human design reading. You do need to have a reading at least once in your life from somebody who could look at how all the pieces and parts of your chart play together. The beauty of a chart is in the synthesis of the parts. And even though when we're teaching or talking about the chart, we have to talk about individual pieces and parts, if you're only looking at a piece or a part out of the context of the whole. And when I say out of the context of the whole, I'm not only talking about out of the context of the whole of the chart, I'm talking about out of the context of the whole of your life. Because there are other factors in your life that are going to influence how you experience and optimize your chart. Let's say, for example, you have an open emotional solar plexus. That's the emotional center, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And let's say because of that, you are an emotional empath, which is a natural part of having that center open. You might have a very different experience with your open emotional solar plexus if you grew up in a very emotionally dysregulated household. And it won't matter what your parents' charts were, because the emotional dysregulation will supersede everybody's charts. And that's going to be part of the bigger picture of the story of who you are. We cannot look at conditioning outside of the context of everybody's actual real life, day-to-day life, and out of context of their conditioning field, and not just the mechanics, because human design is just the mechanics, not just the mechanics of how the charts operate together, but also how are the people behaving, right? What's going on in the entire story of the human condition, and the entire story of the people, yourself, and in your life, and the entire story of your own lived experiences in conjunction with your chart, right? The chart does not answer everything. It doesn't explain everything. It lays out the curriculum, but it doesn't explain everything. And if we take charts out of context of the whole big picture, we're missing big key pieces to helping us take back control over our identity and take back control over how we create in that space between stimulus and response. All right, so the goal, as I said, the overarching goal is optimizing your chart for open centers, for things that are white in your chart. This goes to gates too, by the way. Anything that's white on your chart, the goal is to learn to self-regulate, meaning to learn how to stay true to yourself and your own energy and your own intentions and goals and desires, no matter what's going on around you, right? That's the goal of openness. The goal of definition, meaning optimizing all the things that are colored in on your chart, means your goal is to learn to love and accept those pieces of yourself. So self-acceptance and self-love are the goals of your definition, right? So when we talk about centers and we're talking about calibrating energies in the motors of the chart, we're talking about that through the lens of self-regulation for openness. So and I'm talking about this, I want you to think about it in the context of, if you have these energies white, to look at what's going on in my environment around me, and am I letting my environment dysregulate me, right? And if it's defined, if it's colored in on your chart, your job, your big job, if you will, is to learn how to love and accept these parts of yourselves. And that doesn't mean allow for bad behavior, to not say, oh, well, I'm a manifestor, I can't help throwing chairs, right? That's not making an excuse for bad behavior. That's saying, learning to love and accept those parts of yourselves, and then consciously choosing to express the highest potential of these parts of your story. All right. When we talk about calibrating your energy, we're talking about calibrating the 4 motors in the human design chart. Now, I'm going to start first with the root center, because the root center is the center for divine timing. And when we talk about transformation, timing is everything. And timing is also sometimes the big hiccup for us, right? Because if we look at the root center, first of all, it's the center that's associated with the adrenal glands. So when we're looking at the root center, we're oftentimes looking at the theme of burnout, adrenal fatigue in particular. And we're looking at the theme of adrenal fatigue that happens as a result of not using our motivation and drive correctly, and oftentimes pushing against right timing. Impatience is an architect for compromised dreams. Okay, impatience is an archetype, an architect of compromised dreams. Because when we're not patient and we don't know how to trust in right timing, we jump the gun and we push and we use energy we don't have. And of course, we tend to tank our adrenals. Now, I hope I'm still here. I forgot to push do not disturb again. So everybody's calling me. You can't be in control or in charge of time and timing. Okay, you can't be in charge of time and timing. It's like the one thing we can't control, but you can influence it. And what's so powerful is that when we understand how to influence time and timing, again, you can't influence, you can't change it, you can't force it, you can't be in control of it, but you can influence. And when you understand that, can support you in influencing time and timing. So I'm going to wait a second here because I see that it's cutting out. Okay. All right, let me start over. When you understand that in the root center, the gates of the root center give us a code for how to influence time and timing, it starts to give us insights into how can we regulate, how can we influence divine timing. So I'm going to talk about these gates. I do not want you to go run to your chart and tell me, oh, I don't have that, or I have that. I want you to understand that if it's white, you're here to self-regulate that energy, but you have it. If it's colored in, it means this is a soul theme for you. This is something about yourself that you are learning to optimize, to love and accept. All right, so let's start on the bottom with the gate 58. The 58, we're going to go around the root center clockwise, starting at the bottom left from the 1858 pointing to the spleen center, which is where motivation lives in the chart. The 58 says, if you're trying to create something that doesn't bring you joy, you won't have the energy for it. You'll procrastinate, you'll put it off, you'll dread it, you won't do the work, you won't practice enough to make it better, and it'll be something that, you know, if you're compromising on your joy, is not going to motivate you, okay? And it will block the flow of timing. The 2838, the channel that's kind of in the middle on the left-hand side, says, you're here to dream big. You're here to discover what are the things that are worthy of doing, even if they're challenging, even if they're hard. And sometimes they are hard. The big dreams sometimes are hard. But if it's the dream that's yours to fulfill, this is so crucial, you guys. If it's the dream that's yours to fulfill, you will absolutely find the energy to do it because it'll be worth it. The gate, that channel 2838 says if you're downsizing or downgrading the dream, if you're trying to only create what you think is feasible or what you think you should be dreaming for, you won't do it. You won't do it. Because it's not motivating, right? You won't do it because it's not motivating. Why would we compromise? Why would we push ourselves to do the mediocre? We don't. We don't. If we're really honest with ourselves, we don't, right? We check out, we numb out, we watch TV, instead of doing the thing we need to do because we're not inspired. The 3254, this is the top left-hand side of the root center, says if you want to influence time and timing, you have to set the stage. You have to do the work necessary in order for you to get it done, right? To set to be in charge of creating the timing necessary. So let's think about this in the context of business. If you want to have a thriving business, you have to have things set in place, right? If you want people to notice you, to buy from you, if you want to be able to market and sell, you have to have a product, you have to have a website, you have to have a way for people to pay you. Maybe if you want to write a book, you have to write the book, right? And so if you are not ready for the dream to come true, if you're not ready to be seen, to be discovered, for the right timing to happen because you haven't prepared, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because the universe is like, honey, I know you want to be a New York Times bestseller, but hey, you got to write a book first. At least hire a ghostwriter, right? Moving up to the top of the root center, the 5342 says, you can't have too much unfinished business if you want to get something new started. You got to finish out all the old details and all the old things that need to be moved out of the way. So you have to have, metaphorically and literally, clean closets. You've got to be organized. You have to finish up all that stuff that you haven't finished up because the universe is going to know, hey, you're not ready. You don't have room in your life for this. So you got to make room. And that oftentimes means you got to finish up. You got to bring to completion those things that no longer work or that are clogging up the works in your life. The 63, the middle channel on the top of the root center, says, if you want to influence time and timing, you have to be grateful for where you are. Even if you don't like it, you have to be grateful for it. Because if you're walking around stomping and muttering to yourself and talking about how much you hate this and how much you hate that, you're actually giving energy to that. You're giving energy to what you don't want. And where we put energy and attention, where we put our focus is part of our creative power. And if you're trying to create something or you're putting energy, focused energy towards something you hate, you're going to just keep calling in more of that hatred, that thing you hate, because that's where your focus is. And so gratitude is actually about recalibrating focus. I don't like gratitude. I'll be really honest with you. You know, part of me is like, I don't want to be grateful, right? It's part of my soul theme. I have it in my chart. You know, we don't always want to be grateful because it feels like, no, want to be grateful. And gratitude is about focus with heart. And gratitude is a powerful creative energy. If you want to change something, you got to find the things that you're grateful for and put your energy there, because that's your way of saying, I want more of that, please. I want more of this, please. Moving over to the top right-hand side to the root center, the 952, yeah, there's so many 50s down there. The 952 is all about focus and concentration, which means we have to have focus. We have to be focused, and we have to concentrate on where we're headed and where we're going. So why goals are so essential. And if you've got stuff going on in your life that's distracting you from your focus, right? And that can be something as simple as too much time on your phone or your computer or social media and scrolling on TikToks or Reels or whatever, right? That can be distracting. And that can actually cost you timing and energy for timing. But it also means that there's stuff going on in your life that's keeping you from your focus. Boy, do I know this one. Man, I'm almost 60 years old, right? I'm in an age where I've got 2 aging parents who are 85. I've got adult kids. I still have a teenager at home. I've got grandkids. I've got a husband who's 15 years older than me. I mean, there's so much going on just in my regular life, just without work, that, you know, I'm always having to triage, like, who needs me the most right now? That can, if I'm not careful, if I don't set good, healthy boundaries around some things, and sometimes it's hard because, you know, what am I going to do? Tell my parents no? At this point, no. Right? But, you know, making sure I'm carving out those spaces for focus is so essential. If I lose my focus, things stall very quickly in Karen land, and that might be true for you too. So making sure that you're very, very clear about where you're headed and that your life and lifestyle is really supporting that momentum with the energy of focus is huge. Moving on now over to the right-hand side where we hit the root center to the solar plexus. These next 3 energies are powerful and vital calibrating energies. These energies actually calibrate your frequency of energy. They are part of calibrating what you call in and part of your identity that is associated with your vibrational frequency. The 1949 says we speed up the manifesting process when we have community and support. Because here's what happens. Really, if we look at the theme of the solar plexus, and if I would give you one word to calibrate the emotional solar plexus, that one word is faith. That center is all about calibrating the belief in the unseen. Because if you're building towards your real dream, your purpose, it's going to be bigger than you can do by yourself. It's supposed to be, because we're not really here to do mundane things. We're here to do extraordinary things through the power of faith. We are here to build cathedrals and not use our manifesting skills to build chicken coops, right? But you can't build a cathedral without faith, right? You have to see the end result. You have to see, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, right? You have to see it and build towards it over the arc of your life. And that takes faith, because if it's something you can manifest in 24 hours, well, that's not really worth it, right? What would be the point of that? That's easy. And when I say easy, I mean easy like easy boring, easy like not challenging, easy like It's not going to drive you. It's going to make you compromise for the life, right? I'm making a lot of sacral sounds today. So that 1949 says you need a group of people who believe in you and believe in your dream. You need good, close friends who really see you and see your vision, and who can stand in the gap on those days when you don't have faith, who can hold that faith for you, because you will have days where you lose your faith. There will be days when you're like, why am I here? And why am I doing this, right? You will have those days. That's normal. If you look at the solar plexus, it operates in waves, right? You're either experiencing the waves from within yourself if you're defined. If you have an open solar plexus, you're experiencing everybody else's waves. Faith will be wavering. You want a baseline of consistency with faith, with the understanding that you're going to have rough days or rough cycles or seasons even. Having good friends, good community, people who believe in you, people who can stand with you and put their hands on your back on those days when you can't see it, are going to help you with the manifesting process and actually help you calibrate that emotional solar plexus. That's why community is so important, and why this community, our quantum human design family, is so important, because we can speak the same vocabulary and we can see good things for each other. And that's very special. That's so special. We all need that. The 3955 says you got to have faith, which means if you want to create something big and beautiful, if you want to influence time and timing, you have to clear anything in your way that's keeping you from believing in lack, right? Believing in lack. Technically, that 3955 points towards abundance, and that's not necessarily financial abundance. It can be. It's certainly an abundance of everything, right? It's really an abundance of spirit, and it's spirit. If we think about consciousness, is actually what creates everything, right? Everything that's in us. It's the primacy of creativity is consciousness. Consciousness is not lackful. It's the opposite, right? It's abundant. And so that 3955 says you got to tackle your abundance mindset. You've got to look at any place in your ancestral lineage, in your own personal narrative, in your lived experiences that's causing you to buy into the idea there's less than, because there's not. It's just an idea, and it's an old idea that needs to die, because there's more than enough. And when we can stand in that energy, and this is energy, that energy of enoughness, then we calibrate not only timing, but we also calibrate the emotional solar plexus. And that's the thing to calibrating the emotional solar plexus. You have to believe in enough and enoughness. And if you can do that, you can calibrate that emotional solar plexus along with the root center. Last but definitely not least in this conversation for today, when we look at the 4130, that last channel connecting the root to the solar plexus, that's the channel of fantasy and desire, is what we call it, traditional human design. It is the place where we envision, where we hold a vision of what we want. And again, that's not the Band-Aid stuff. That's not, I want a red car with a silver lining, with silver, leather seats. It's not the little stuff. It's the big stuff. It's that vision of, I want to build an empire of deconditioning. I want to decondition 15% of the population on the planet. That's my dream, right? When we hold those big visions and then sustain those visions, because the 30 is called the clinging fire, right? It's the passion, it's the fuel, it's the fire underneath the dream that keeps that dream burning inside of us, that keeps that passion burning inside of us. That's essential to A, influencing time and timing, and B, calibrating the emotional center, right? When we have passion and faith, and we have support, that's really what that solar plexus is all about. Passion, faith, and support. When we have passion, faith, and support, and we're able to sustain that note, that abundant frequency, think about it this way. When we think about abundance and the frequency of the emotional solar plexus, I always think of it like a flute, right? If you watch Lizzo play her flute, right? She knows how to do circular breathing. I don't know how people do that, but she's able to hold a note on that flute, right? And she can hold it for way longer than one breath, because she's able to blow and breathe in through her nose and blow out through her mouth, and breathe in through her nose and blow out through her mouth and her lungs all at the same time, right? So phenomenal skill. And because she can do that, she can hold a note with her flute, right? Your emotional solar plexus is like a flute, and it is built to hold the note of abundance. And that 4130 is the circular breathing, if you will, that gives us the capacity to keep holding that note. It's passion. It's the passion and the fire and the faith, and of course the community, that gives us the ability to just keep holding that frequency, holding that note of faith and abundance. And when we can do that, then the universe is like, whoop, grease lightning in terms of how we create. We really influence the time and timing, the speed at which we can create the next right step and the next right step and the next right step. So that's the work, if you will, the work of liminality. That's the thing we're supposed to be doing while we're resting and while we're healing our burnout. We're recalibrating. we're contemplating, we're healing our own inner sense of enoughness. We are realigning our own inner narrative of our own enoughness. Any place where we perceive ourselves as being not enough, that's what we're designed to heal when we are resting, when we are burned out, when we're in that liminal phase. On Monday, I'm going to start a 5-day masterclass series. Teresa's going to post the registration link below. I'm going to teach you some of the science behind what I've been talking about. We're going to talk about not just the psychological science, we're going to talk about the neuroscience of what needs to happen for you to make changes that are sustainable and enduring during these seasons of disruption, the void, and expansion. We're going to talk about how do you hold true to your frequency. This, by the way, is a revolutionary act right now. How do you stay true to yourself, your energy, your identity, your own capacity to choose what's right for you when the whole world feels like it's falling apart? That is a revolutionary act, because when you can do that, you become ungovernable, right? You become sovereign in a way that no one can take away from you. And you engineer magic from that place. So we're going to talk about how do you do that. We're going to talk about the power of narrative. We're going to talk about how do you shift and change your narrative. We're going to talk about the impact of changing your narrative on the body, on health, on wellness. We've got 5 days of amazing content for you, totally free. We start Monday at 11 a.m. Central. Come join us. We also have a special bonus day the following Tuesday. I think that's May the 5th or 6th. Forgive me, I don't know exactly what day that is, but it's the Tuesday. We're going to be doing a story lab, a little mini story lab, which is a great way for you to get some deep insights into what might be holding you back from your magic. So join us. Be there, be square, right? I will see you on Monday. Take good care of yourselves. Remember, you are a once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event. You deserve every big dream you have in your heart. So do the work. Do that calibrating work that you deserve to do so your dreams can come true. I'll see you all on Monday. Bye.